everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blackbird. Today I am here with David Snyder, who is the Executive Director of Sustainable Medical Missions. Hey David, thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
I just want to kick off the episode by asking you, can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, for myself, I've been involved in a lot of different nonprofit activities kind of all throughout my life. Have been kind of working internationally, have done like missions work and other kind of pieces. And around the time that I was actually beginning to work with Habitat for Humanity, I had a short period where I was able to kind of look at, what would really be ideal? They said, if I was to make up, my ideal job, the ideal thing, what would it look like? Mm-hmm. And so just took out, a journal and started kind of sketching out, what would be the ideal? And so I kind of began to look at, based on my past experience of doing a lot of work with sustainable development, as well as kind of working with people and people in poverty and a lot of international work, what could this potentially look like? And so I began to kind of sketch out some kind of basic ideas of how would you make an organization that would be empowering to people, that would be sustainable, that would be addressing a lot of different kind of needs and concerns that exist throughout throughout the world. And then approximately about 3 months into actually working with Habitat, one of my really close friends, that was actually my godfather, we usually talk to maybe at most once or twice a year, calls me up, asks me some basic things that he would typically talk about. Then he's like, David, I know this is going to sound a little weird, but God really put upon my heart to tell you that I think you should start this kind of ministry, and explained some of the basics that really matched very closely to the things that I was talking about. I was like, that's really strange. And this guy that I really talked to comes up and starts explaining some of the things which are similar to that. And so I was really excited talking to him, and we theorized and talked a little bit about things. So it came to the end and was like, did God or someone tell you how this is going to work, or is there any funding for this? And he was like, no, but I'm sure this is supposed to happen. And packed everything up, put our house up for sale. Still nothing, but actually as we're moving back to Cincinnati, literally in the moving truck from North Carolina back to Cincinnati, my father had done a small investment in a hospital, and basically the hospital ended selling, and through that whole process and then providing some of the seed funds, which was really a huge, great blessing for us to be able to at least launch the work.
So how did you get involved with Africa, and how did it turn into that? The medical part of it makes sense, especially with what you were saying with your dad. Do you have a background in that? How did all of that start?
I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, but I've done a lot of work in medical research and stuff myself, for about 2.5 years. Was around medicine. My father's a doctor, my brother, my uncle, my grandfather, great uncle.
Wow.
Aunts are nurses and physical therapists, so there's a heavy bend towards medicine in my family. So that was a very clear medical component of things, but focused on Africa. One of the biggest things that I remember throughout all the work and stuff we've been doing is really the importance of relationship. And as we talk through things and we're exploring things, one of the things that he has that for the last, at that point, 15 years now, 20 years, a little over that actually, but he had been working with many students that are coming from these African nations, as well as not so much Southeast, more Central Asia, so India and places like that. And one of the places that he had the most graduates was actually from Kenya and Uganda. And so we began with these investments or relationships that he had spent decades investing in these people, discipling them, mentoring them, knew who they were, knew their character, and really began with those relationships within Kenya and Uganda, and that really launched that initial focus.
So can you tell us a little bit about how Sustainable Medical Missions works in the countries with the providers? What exactly do you guys do?
We first go in and provide training. So we begin with what we have, our entry level training, as we describe, 3 basic things. We go over a medical process, which is something that was developed here in Cincinnati, Ohio, has been used throughout the world now at this point. Its trademark name is 090, but really it's, for those that are familiar with some type of kind of like business and engineering. It's in some ways kind of like Six Sigma on steroids for medicine. And it's something which is very unique because within the medical community, there's a bend throughout the world to say, like, what is that one thing, that one pill, that one device that's going to solve everything? And there are some great advancements that have come through that. But the reality is we're complex people, we're complex systems, and you have to look at things systemically in order to actually create truly sustainable solutions and ones that actually address all the complexities of life. And so through those things, those that have actually used that kind of process have actually been able to, in something even as complex as surgical care, have eliminated blood transfusions, complications, infections, actually from these major invasive surgeries like replacing hips and knees and things that you usually have. Even in the United States, you still have complication rates in 5 to 7%. The other kind of key component is looking at what are the neglected conditions within their community. So we specifically talk about, for every place we go, we do research and talk to people and the things they would care about, and we put together kind of modules and different kind of pieces about what type of diseases are present within their communities. And also have a lot of people share their experiences of what was it like. And so we have them share not only for those that were these early adopters, like what was really successful, but also what were the challenges that you experienced. And that's also a really important piece is them sharing like what didn't work.
Yeah.
Like what was a failure, what were the problems they were having. We also provide resources for them to do these type of things. Education is wonderful and powerful, and they're able to do a lot of things just even with their own resources, but these are neglected conditions, neglected people, and very resource poor. And so to really kind of move things to scale, you have to infuse it with some resources typically to actually allow it to happen. Now there are many exceptions which haven't required additional resources, but some require the extra just kind of like push to at least begin.
Yeah.
And we actually call them like seed grant funds because we give the ownership kind of back to the people. And so while this is the framework they have to follow, they actually determine like what are the diseases they're going to focus on, how's it going to look. They follow the kind of 0 on 0 framework, but they are still determining how it'll look. And in that, they begin to implement, and they start very small on purpose.
And that's something that I think really sets Sustainable Medical Missions apart from a lot of other nonprofits is that collaborative nature of how you work kind of from ground up with the training, as well as identifying the problems that are going on. What is the main concern to the doctors and the people? Can you tell us a little bit more about how you developed that, or when that kind of clicked for you, like this is maybe not the right way, the way things have been handled previously is not the correct way to be handling it?
Even from the very beginning, the luxury of actually spending an entire year just researching and asking questions. And that was something that I know a lot of people don't get to do, but that was a huge luxury for us of just going to the place and saying, hey, this is what we think we're going to do. Does it even make sense to you? Like, honestly, tell us, like, does this actually really make sense? And because there were those relationships established, across decades, there's enough equity in the relationship for them to begin to say, like, all right, I can tell you honestly about a little bit about actually what really kind of makes sense. And so from that, we kind of learned a couple things.
Yeah.
The research, everything said, all right, you're supposed to, just even for example, you're supposed to actually do the training actually with community healthcare workers, which makes sense. There's more of them, they're cheaper, and instead of investing in doctors. But the one thing, even from the very beginning, we're asking questions about, hey, we're going to kind of do it this way, and we were amongst a group of doctors and nurses and others, and like, yeah, I understand why you would say that. And I understand why, World Health and others would recommend that. However, we're the ones that are telling the community healthcare workers what to do.
Yeah.
So you can train one of us or 50 of them. And so from that, was kind of one of the main discoveries, but I guess more specifically on the collaborative kind of piece, which that does pertain to it, because we really felt very, very called, convicted, I guess, in saying like, all right, there are these existing leaders within this country, so why wouldn't we invest in leadership which is already there? If there's never any local ownership, like things really won't sustain. Like once the money's gone, they just shift to something else. Not definitively every single time, but
there's a trend.
Yeah, there's a trend that they typically won't continue on the work if it was never their own. It was never their own idea. So that was something which really was strategic for us as well. in order for them to actually kind of maintain the work and continue the work, that's something they had to own. They have to have their investment.
So it's interesting because by investing in the relationship, you wind up strategically being able to better invest in your resources and long-term have a greater long-term outcome success because you're doing things that people actually care about, and because they're invested in it, they actually want to sustain it.
Sure.
Is that correct?
It is.
Wow, that's impressive. I mean, that's a great model as far as treatment goes and as far as investing resources goes. I want to kind of talk about what are your programs now that you're doing, and kind of where are you looking to expand as far as programs go, and even countries? What does kind of the future look like for sustainable medical missions?
Sure. So some of the biggest things for us, I mean, as we go in these places, a long-term investment for us. So that's strategically, as you look at expansion investment, we want to make sure that we go deep and not just wide. And so a lot of things we're doing right now, at least over the next couple of years, is making sure that we're investing deeply before we go any further. So that's really what our kind of main focus at the moment is, making sure that those that are there are able to continue to do the work, and that they're the ones that also do a lot of the training. Like over the last couple of years, we've actually measured like what has been the local investment actually in the work. And so like last year, for example, we gave $108,000 in seed grant funds out to 43 different sites throughout the world. They actually invested in actual cash and resource capital over $28,000 in these very resource poor areas. And even more impressively, they invested over 62,000 volunteer hours, which if you actually equate kind of hours back into kind of money, I mean, basically the local investment was 15 times greater than what we provided ourselves. So there's already a lot of like hope, even in those type of statistics, that it'll be very sustainable. So for this year, a lot of our long-term people we've been investing in for a while have really been transitioning them from providing like true seed grant funds to actually these sustainable income kind of sources that will then continue to provide resources into kind of hopefully perpetuity.
And what are some ways that people can get involved and help support you in this process, especially in this kind of new direction of where you're trying to take sustainable medical missions in the future?
There's certainly the classic things. I mean, people certainly can invest kind of financially and those pieces, but there's a lot for someone to really invest in anything. I mean, even for the sake of those that are involved in the work, it's kind of having like some skin in the game on some levels. So there's ways that people can join us actually on these trips and meet these people and see these places, and there's people that can join us actually on the trips when we're doing the teaching and training. Some people are highly academic, love those. Majority of people sometimes like, I don't know if that's the best. That's the best use of my time. So we actually have like immersion trips where people are actually able to experience like what is life like in these places, and actually able to see some of the projects and stuff going on. And that's really a good way to kind of see some of those kind of pieces, but you don't have to go. We have a lot of people that are investing their time and resources into looking at what are some of the best practices across the different things we're training on. So as we're looking at some of the disease models, like things continue to kind of change and evolve, and we have to continue to update our material. There's a lot of other pieces to actually do really sustainable projects. So like things across like finance and leadership, and many things that would fall kind of more in kind of the corporate business world that would actually allow for really sustaining kind of projects, and investing in what are both the material that we're actually training people on, but what are some of the ways that we need to actually look at, explore, set up all these kind of projects in a way that will truly be kind of best practices, will be sustainable, that are culturally sensitive, but are still based upon what we know kind of globally actually works well.
Can you tell me about a time where you faced an obstacle in your journey with sustainable medical missions and how you overcame that? And then also a word of encouragement for viewers today who may be watching and have an idea of their own that they want to pursue but are maybe kind of scared to go after it.
The biggest challenges are usually around people, and that's one of the things that sometimes is very discouraging across many types of businesses or anything, is you have this great idea, this great vision of something, and then someone ends up derailing it. One of the biggest pieces that we try to really kind of stress, is the local empowerment of everything. We're trying to make sure the local leaders are seen as the heroes, and they're the ones that kind of get the credit. We try to be as invisible as possible. You know, as a 6'8" white man, it takes a lot of effort to be invisible, but we do that as best as we possibly can. And I mean, because of this stereotype, actually within a lot of these developing nations, particularly in Africa, the entire continent, but as well as some other kind of places as well, with this belief that they actually don't have the ability to address the problems. And so we're very purposeful about not showing ourselves there so that they're not seeing, once again, these Western people are coming and doing things.
A word of encouragement that you have for somebody that may be watching that wants to start their own nonprofit or just go after an idea that they have that they're maybe kind of scared to at this point.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the kind of biggest things is, as you're kind of doing the work, is just kind of moving forward, like certainly with kind of conviction and kind of faith. Like any kind of great innovation is always scary at the very beginning. Like you never know like exactly what's going to happen. Like things will go wrong, and being okay with that. And that's one of the things even like we tell kind of the people as they're doing these pilot grants is they're even themselves going out doing this work. Like it's okay to fail. It's okay for things not to go right. That's why you kind of begin small. You begin to prune ideas. You don't have to hit a home run from the very beginning. You just begin to have the successes, and you really celebrate those early successes. And just being able to honestly evaluate things and not be concerned with looking successful from the very beginning or even looking successful later, and being okay. And I mean, that honesty and transparency, you know, it seems like you shouldn't do that, but it actually really is very endearing to both the people you're working with, even as well as your supporters and investors. I mean, they want to know that you're competent in the stuff you're doing, but at the same time, I mean, people are smart and people know that things make sense. And anyone that's been involved in business for a while that has any type of success, or certainly anyone that's worked on anything innovative, like knows that things are going to fail. They know it's going to fail. If you tell them everything worked right, they know you're lying anyways.
That's a great point. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
No, my great pleasure.
And thank you for joining us, and join us next time for the next episode of Blackbird.